gonna start.
Great.
Otherwise we'll go all night, so that makes sense probably. So I want to say a few words of introduction, one by way of premise. So I love the study of halakha. I think that it's like beautiful and fascinating, and the process by which halakha is developed from a verse in the Torah or not a verse in the Torah, some rabbinic innovation that was created, let's say 2,000 years ago, until its modern day practice and application is a very, very beautiful practice of balancing like the world changing and our desire to stay close to what has come before us. But the reason why we want to stay close to what has come before us is because that thing is like full of deep lessons about how to be a human being in the world, and particularly how to be a Jewish human being in the world. And of the many ways to be a human being in the world, like this is a very, very good one, full of like deep, important questions and thoughtfulness and just many, many years of Jews thinking about what is the good Jewish life poured into our practice that we still live out today. And so to me, that's what's really, really exciting about halakha. And what I'm hoping we'll do today is kind of see one small area, very, very narrow area of halakha, as first conceived of in the Mishnah. So that's around the year like 200, but that's just a record of oral tradition that had been around for a long time before that. And then you can look on the back. I gave you like a little timeline, the last page, all the way through us today talking about it. But the last source we'll look at is from the 1600s. So I give you a timeline because we're going to look at a lot of different people. I know like when Rabbi Walkenfeld gives these talks, it's usually some sort of like history focused on maybe one practice or idea or person. So like he'll be talking about people in the next series. We're going to be talking about a lot of different people in a lot of different places. And that's what's so fabulous about halakha, is that when we study it, we get to see this conversation that's stretched over time and over all the places where Jewish communities have taken root. So we're going to have people in like the Sasanian Empire, in Iran, in France, in Morocco, in Egypt, in Germany, someone who is expelled from France, someone who is expelled from Germany, someone who is expelled from Spain, Poland, Lithuania, and here we are in the United States in Chicago continuing this very same conversation. So that's everyone who appears on the back here, we're going to hopefully get a chance to see tonight. So if you're ever like, who are we talking about again and who is this person, you can flip to the back and you will find them. So it's also meant to be like a little bit of like a cheat sheet because it's confusing and there's a lot of people. But just to reiterate again, the premise is that halakha has these like deep human values and pushes us to like ask good questions about what it means to be a person interacting with other people, interacting with the Almighty, and trying to live a valuable life. Okay, so we're going to begin. I left the verse off of here that this all revolves around, but it will come up. The Torah says not to cook a baby goat in its mother's milk, and that becomes the origin for all the rules that we have. There's source sheets in the middle. Welcome, so glad you all are here. Not to cook a kid in its mother's milk, and that becomes the source for the prohibitions on dairy and meat cooked in combination. And here we go. So source number one comes from the Mishnah in Cholin, and in the Gemara it's found on 103b. So every kind of flesh is forbidden to cook in milk, except for the meat of fish and locusts. And it's forbidden to place meat upon the table with cheese, except for the flesh of fish and locusts. Cool. So what the main question that arises from this is like, why not? Like, it's just a table. I can put stuff on the table. Doesn't mean I'm going to eat it together. What's the concern? Why is this such a concern that it actually goes on for another two Mishnayot after this, which we'll see in a second, but I just want to look at the Rashi on here. So, because Rashi's gonna start helping us address, like, what are we concerned about? So Rashi says about Sur lahalot, because you might come to eat them together. So that was concern number one. Concern number two is that they'll touch each other and absorb from one another. So even though you're allowed to eat meat and then cheese after, or sorry, to eat meat after cheese, to eat meat after cheese. Just said the wrong thing. Cool. You're allowed to eat meat after cheese, which the Gemara is going to go on to explain, but we don't want them to be absorbed into one another because you can't eat them at the same time, and they should not be combined in that balua, absorbed kind of way. Okay, so now we're going to just continue on to the next Mishnah. A bird can be, poultry can be on the table with cheese, as long as you don't eat them together, says Beit Shammai. But Beit Hillel Beit Hillel say, no, you can't put them up, and you also can't eat them together. So given the Rashi that we just saw with these two kind of concerns. One is that you'll come to eat them together, and one is that through touching they'll absorb from one another. How can you justify Beit Shammai?
Maybe he didn't consider fowl as meat.
Right. Okay. So first of all, we're talking about chicken. So maybe just everything gets knocked down a level. Fowl is not meat. Good. Anyone else?
And again, we're still talking about just placing on the table. We're not talking about mixing together, putting on top of.
Mm-hmm.
It's just still the table, and it's the lower level of fowl. That's not what the verse says.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say,
right.
Don't boil chicken in lamb's milk or something. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Wendy.
It also doesn't indicate whether they're cooked or not cooked. They just come in from the market and they're in bags on the table.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What is the boundary? Like whether.
Great. Perfect. Great question. Yes. Yeah, in the back.
Isn't fowl considered fleishings?
So that gets developed around in the times of the Mishnah. And how it's considered fleishigs and to what degree it's considered fleishigs, like there's still a disparity of practice in the Jewish world today. Yeah, sorry.
Or even like for, I don't know, you think of like a cow or like in its mother's milk, like with a bird that's not really concerned, like so should it be treated the same way as like a calf?
Because it's not a baby animal. That's what you're saying?
Or like in its mother's milk, like with regard to like a literal.
Right, so how literally do we take in its mother's milk? Because it's cheese, after all. Like, everything is one step removed. Okay, great. And so now, we're going to get back to what Wendy was saying in right now. Basically, so the Mishnah continues. This is a leniency of Beit Shammai and a stringency of Beit Hillel, which it's interesting when the Mishnah is self-reflective. It's very unusual for Beit Shammai to be lenient and Beit Hillel to be strict. And here's the Mishnah saying that about itself, which is like just a fascinating moment to point out. Be'ezah shulchan amru. So what table are we talking about? Wendy, this is you. What table are we talking about? What's the case? B'shulchan she'ochel alav. It's the table that you're eating on. Aval b'shulchan she'suder alav she'suder alav et hatavshil, this is a typo, that's why I can't read it. On the table that you are organizing the food, notein zeh b'tzad zeh ve'eino choshish. You put them next to each other and you don't have to worry about it. It's et ha instead of. Okay, cool. Okay, so then Rashi says, "B'shulchan shulchalav da'aydi d'mash she'beyada ati le'nuchei zeh gabei zeh." Right. So since you're touching them with your hands, you'll come to put them next to each other and like get them confused. So all of a sudden it switches from, we have a conversation about tables, so you're like, well, maybe you just came in from the market, they're, like you're not about to eat them, you're not going to get them confused, they're just all in one bag. So that would be on your countertop, let's say, right? So we're not talking about your countertop is okay, we're talking about the table that you're eating at, and all of a sudden we're concerned about your hand. So until now it sort of sounded like the problem was the table, and then Rashi keeps pushing it. It's not the table, it's your hands, right? This came up in the first Rashi also. He says, maybe they'll touch each other or you'll come to eat them together. It's more about the person. And here it's not even just about the person, it's about the person's hands. So there is this kind of interesting, like what's like pushing the law here? Is what's pushing the law like some problem in tables? Like, oh, the table, like, won't necessarily put them together, or once they're on the table, they're considered like they're one thing. That would be a pretty like easy read of the Mishnayot. But Rashi keeps saying it's not about the table, it's about the person. It's not about the table, it's about the person. And that distinction is one to keep in mind. So now the Mishnah is now going to turn to people, which is probably what was motivating Rashi to do that all along. This is the third Mishnah on this subject. The Mishnah says, "Sorer adam basar uvina mipachad echad." A person can wrap up meat and cheese in one cloth, but they shouldn't be touching each other. So like imagine a big cloth, you like wrap up your cheese, and then you wrap up your meat over here. So it's all one cloth, but they're like protected in between. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Shnei achsanaim ochlim al shulchan echad, zeh basar v'zeh gvina ve'ein chosheshin. Two people at an inn can eat at the same table, this one meat and the other one cheese, without hesitation. Why does Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel say that? Yeah, Avi.
I mean, it could just be that if two people are at an inn, you're not going to share food with each other, and there's no risk of sharing food. That's what we were worried about to begin with.
Right, so until now we've only had one person. It's been you in your home with your countertop or your table, and we're concerned about your hands, but there's no other person who's now getting involved. All of a sudden, we have two people at an inn. So let's like pause for a second and just test this out for a minute. Who do you share food with in your life?
People you know, your friends, your family.
Family, strongly family, friends. Anyone else? People at shul. Good. Good.
Invited by a host, so even if you don't know everyone, but it's the same host, and there's that relationship.
Like someone you're having a meal with,
What does that mean?
that you are explicitly sharing in your food together.
Right, and as Libby pointed out, that person can be a stranger, but what makes a stranger safe? That there's like one person who connects you, maybe? So wait, but let's one second. I just want to test that further. So like you're in a hotel and you're there with like, and you like walk into let's say it's like Israel or New York or something, somewhere where you know a lot of people. You walk in and you see a friend and you're like, oh, my friend David, what's up? And then like you have your lunch and he has his lunch and you're like both sitting there eating and you know each other. And then David sees his friend Sarah, and Sarah walks over and she's like, hey, and then grabs a bite of your sandwich. Like, how does that feel?
Unlikely.
Unlikely to happen, or you wouldn't like it if it
It's
happened?
rude, yeah.
Oh, it would not likely happen.
So you have the same degree of separation as you do at a Shabbos meal where like I'm the host and my table is full of strangers, and somehow there you're like, pass the salad, and people are like, okay. But if like I'm at this hotel with my friends Steven and Sarah's like, hey Leah, pass the salad. I'm like, huh, why?
So you're not intending to share.
Okay, so it's about intention to share. So if I, that day, like when I packed my salad, was like, I'm gonna meet a stranger and maybe they'll want some of my salad, then like that would be cool because I would have come into this encounter with an intention to share my salad with a stranger.
Well, it's also not just your intention, it's the implicit agreement in the whole surrounding, where I don't think that exists in even if you know one person, I don't think that exists.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also ownership of food, because in your hotel example, everyone brought their own meal. If it's an example where the hotel made the food and put it on the table, it becomes different even if you're sitting with a stranger, because food will be passed. It's for the common.
Right, so now, right, that's a great point, right? So I'm at a potluck where like I know one other person, but mostly it's strangers, and someone says, oh, pass the salad. The premise of where we are is that food is for sharing. So it's just a question of is food mine or is food for sharing? And that, I think, is a very like core element of how we think about food. So like let's say I'm at Kiddush. The food that's on the buffet, what is that?
For sharing.
Food for sharing. I take some of that food and put it on my plate.
Not for sharing.
Not for sharing. Now my child walks over. How does that change the situation?
To your
Sure.
To my plate? Because there's some people with whom food is always for sharing.
Yeah.
And those are the people we started out with, right? Family, basically, and maybe some very close friends, depending on who they are. I had a friend in college who was perpetually eating off my plate, and it drove me bananas. And because that was not food for sharing. It was on my plate, and he was not one of the like always overriding sharers. He just had bad table manners. Right, okay, so basically, right, in our world, in our society, there's food for sharing, food that's ours. The location of the food matters. Food that's on my plate, most of the time, not for sharing. And the truth is, right, like even like I as an adult child, I don't eat off my parents' plates. Like if I were 3, that might be, or a baby, like that might be an appropriate thing to do. But even as you grow up, like that relationship around food with people who, like it changes over time. And so the location of food and the characters involved determine whether it's for sharing or whether it's not, whether it's personal. And so now here's the next question. Does the Talmud share that understanding with us? So we've so far only seen the Mishnah, but does the Mishnah share that understanding with us?
To some extent, I mean, because it's designating like this situation at an inn it's assumed you don't know the other. Everyone's passing through at an inn, so they're not in your inner circle. We haven't explicitly said that it's if you're family, it might be a bigger problem. We've really just discussed one person by themselves or 2 people who are strangers at a strange place.
Right.
Well, I think the kitchen or the table in your house is like your family table.
Right, meaning a stranger walks in off the street and sits down at the table in my house and starts eating my food. That's not a situation where I'm like, oh, well, you're at the table, so it's yours now. Yeah.
Right. But what about if you're the hotel owner and so it's your table? Are you allowed to put cheese and meat out for guests?
Great question. Like, are you meant to? So,
meaning the Mishnah's notion of table. You don't necessarily have to presume it's a private table.
Correct.
Or a private table.
Seems like a bad idea if you want to keep your kosher certification.
Right, CRC, not going to be into that. Yeah, right. It's so we don't know enough yet about the Mishnah. Like, meaning the Talmud is gonna get at these exact questions, or in my opinion, it's gonna get at these exact questions momentarily. Okay, so let's dive in. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chanan bar Ami Amar Shmuel lo shanu ela she'in makirin zed zeh, aval makirin zed zeh asur. Right, so the Mishnah says, we're not worried. If 2 people come and they eat at an inn, one can eat meat, one can eat cheese, we're not worried. Rav Chanan bar Ami says in the name of Shmuel, no, this is only taught if they don't know each other. But if they do know each other, it's prohibited. Meaning what?
What we said is true.
But, okay. So what's the assumption? Meaning, let's talk about the assumption of food sharing, right? We're all sitting at a table, and I'm sitting at a table at a hotel, Marilyn walks in. What's the Gemara's assumption about what Marilyn is likely to do? I know her, she's a member of a shul that I work for. What's the Gemara's assumption that what might happen right now?
She might eat off your plate.
She might eat off my plate.
Or you might offer her food from your plate.
Right?
Probably more likely.
Hopefully. Right, but there's an assumption that in that moment, there's someone I know, and the natural thing for us to do would be to share food.
But nowadays, the hotel, people won't bring their own food.
Okay, let's say we're in a park. We're all picnicking. It's a beautiful day, and and it happens, I'm picnicking in a park, and I see you, and you walk over, and you sit down at my picnic table, because it was just me picnicking by myself, you also picnicking by yourself. And the Gemara's assumption is, in that moment, you'll be like, hey, Leah, that pastrami looks great. Or I would be like, hey, Marilyn, I have some great pastrami. One way or the other. Okay, so that situation, oh yeah, keep it.
Just to be clear, this is all presuming that the chashash, the concern, is about consuming the food and not
Having them touch each other.
Yeah, having the foods touch each other to kind of your body.
Right, it is confusing what exactly the concern is.
Because we could imagine that people who know each other might be less careful about their foods touching.
Right.
they're sitting closer to each other, things might get mixed up, rather than necessarily eating the foods.
So, yes, potentially, but I would argue that those two things are not so different. Meaning, if you're a stranger, I'm not going to be like, hey, can I touch my sandwich to yours? That would be like a weird thing to do.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of like intentionally having them touch, but
You'll
if
be
they're
more comfortable, or you'll sit closer. Yeah. Yeah.
For the first two Mishnah, it didn't actually specify that it was only one person at the table. Are we just assuming that?
No, maybe I'll say better what I was trying to say, which is that the people are not a factor. It's about like an arrangement of items, so table, meat, cheese, and now all of a sudden we have items plus people, and everything goes crazy. Yeah. Wait.
Yeah, no, that was just a question.
Okay, cool. Did you have something? Okay, cool. Okay, so that's case one in the Gemara. Tani Rami Hachi, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Shnei Barach Sanaim, שנתארחו לפונדק אחד, זה בא מן הצפון, וזה בא מן הדרום, זה בא בחתיכתו, וזה בא בגבינתו, אוכלים על שולחן אחד, זה בשר וזה גבינה, ואין חוששים. So we have a Baraita. In the Gemara, a Baraita is in some ways a trump card, right? So we had a statement in the name of Shmuel, and now we're going to have a Baraita that the Gemara thinks supports it. So I just read half the Gemara, but half the Baraita. But I'll just translate, and then we'll get to why it thinks this supports the statement of Shmuel, and that's like it's considered like a very strong support. So the Baraita says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, two guests who are in one inn. One comes from the north, one comes from the south, one comes with his meat, one comes with his cheese. They can eat on one table their meat and their cheese, and they don't need to worry about it. So that's very much the language of the Mishnah. Hey, there's source sheets in the middle. And they don't need to worry about it, so that's the Mishnah. V'lo asru ela b'tfisa achat. And they only forbade it where the two eat from one parcel. So we're going to investigate what we mean by parcel in a second. But then the Gemara says, tfisa achat tzilkadaitach? What, like, right, from one parcel, you can't mean that. Ke'in tfisa achat. Rather you mean they're as though they are eating from one parcel. So this is very unclear what this means, and we're going to see a number of two main different opinions that come from it. Okay, so just to reiterate, right, we have a statement in the name of Shmuel, and then we have a Baraita that basically says the same thing as the Mishnah, and then the question is, when do we, worry about these two strangers eating together, or two people eating together? It has to meet the standard of ke'in tfisa achat. It has to meet the standard of as if they're eating together, or as if they're eating from one parcel. So like, what does that mean? What is to eat from one parcel? That's what we're going to look at commentators about, but just to finish up the Gemara, because the commentators read this in context. Amalei Rav Yimar bar Shalmei Abaye, Shnei achim umakpidim ze al ze mahu. Two brothers who are mad at each other. What's the rule? So what do we think? What would the rule be? Two brothers who are mad at each other.
They could eat together.
Why?
They're unlikely to share.
They're unlikely to share because they're mad at each other. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other ideas?
Unless they want to have a food fight or something.
Maybe they'll have a food fight.
It goes the other way.
Two brothers who are mad at each other. What if can they eat at the same table, meat and dairy?
I'd say no.
Why?
Because they might reconcile.
They might reconcile. Right, like we're eating together.
Maybe one will trade the other's food up on purpose.
He's hungry, he'll trade the other's food up on purpose, so intense.
Dark.
Brothers are always brothers, even if they're mad at each other.
Right. Even if they're mad at each other, they're always brothers. Anyone who's walking in now, you probably saw the wrong time on the Facebook event. I'm really sorry about that. You're welcome to stay, there's still half the time. Totally my fault. Okay. So here's the answer. The answer is given in Gemara code, but it's like great. Amar le yomru kol asrikin asurin ustrike vaitus mutarin. So this requires a lot of backstory. What this means is that it's a lo plug. This is the Gemara's way of saying lo plug, which is a rabbinic way of saying that we don't make exceptions. There's a rule: if you know each other, you can't eat meat and dairy on the same table. We don't make exceptions for brothers who are angry at each other. Like, stop trying to find like ridiculous cases. So what the words here mean is when you make matzah, you've never seen matzah with like a pattern on it, right? It's always just like lines and holes, lines and holes, lines and holes. And the reason why not is because we're nervous that someone's gonna like get really into their matzah decorating, which by the way, like really makes sense because like it's a mitzvah and we like mitzvah to be pretty, so we totally understand the instinct to do that. You'll get really into your matzah decorating, your matzah will turn into chametz, and it will become prohibited matzah. So we don't let people decorate their matzahs. And then this guy named Beitus was like, back up, I invented a stamp. I can stamp my matzahs, they'll be gorgeous, and they'll be decorated, and it won't take any extra time. And the rabbis were like, nope, your decorated matzahs cannot be used the same way that no one else's decorated matzahs can be used. So a long way to say, like, we don't make exceptions, but since it's here, I thought I would explain, and that's why we don't have decorated matzahs. Okay, so and if you thought, like, machine matzahs were like a new thing, so the Gemara describes like at least some mechanized element of the matzah process.
Why are matzahs called srikim?
It's that's a word for designed matzah.
Oh, designed. Right. Matzahs are implicit or understood. Right. Okay, yeah. Got it. All the designed ones.
Yeah, designed. Because and the sense is that like people will be confused by it. They'll be like, oh, he's allowed to design his matzahs, why can't I? And then they'll go home and they'll like make pretty flowers in their matzahs, and their matzahs will become chametz. Okay, so back to the question of what is ke'in tfisa achad. What does it mean? Like it's as if they're like one parcel, and that's going to then become the standard for whether it's allowed or permitted. So if it's allowed, then they're not as if it's one parcel. And if it's prohibited, then it'll be as if it's one parcel. I'll say that again and make sure I get it right. If it's allowed, then they're not like one parcel. And if it's prohibited, then they are like one parcel. So what is this parcel that we're talking about? So the Tosfot is going to spell out the two main positions about what this is. So the first position that the Tosfot are going to say is, and Tosfot are on the page of the Talmud. So at the inside of the Talmud, like near the spine, you'll have Rashi, who we've been looking at all along, and on the outside you'll have Tosfot. And another time we can say more about Tosfot, but what's really awesome about Tosfot is that because they're descendants or disciples of Rashi, and Rashi made the whole Talmud like understandable, such that then they could say, well, we know enough Talmud to ask a question like from over there to over here. And so they were the first people to like put together kind of almost like a source sheet like this, where we can bring together many different things from many different places and say, well, like the Talmud is meant to be coherent, and I don't understand how this piece over here fits with this piece over there, which until Rashi existed, people weren't really able to do. So that's like the innovation of Tosfot, which is, as you can see from the existence of a source sheet, a really nice one. Okay, cool. So they're like really, really advanced in their understanding of the Talmud. So Tosfot are going to say, okay, if it appears as one parcel, ke'in tfisa achad, ve'im yesh davar mafsik lo have ke'in tfisa achad. So if there's something that separates, then it's not like one parcel, right? So I don't know, if I have like a bag but like a huge piece of cardboard in the middle of it, then it's not one parcel, right? Like the way you would maybe pack up like wine bottles with like separations between them so they don't like clank against each other. So then Tosfot would say, like in that situation, it's not one parcel. And so he's going to say, therefore, today, when one person wants to eat meat and another person wants to eat dairy al shulchan echad on one table, menichim lechem o kankan o shar kelim, we put bread or a pitcher or some other vessel lahafsik ben atayim to separate between them, o ochal mapa acheret, or you eat on a different tablecloth, and that's like enough of a separation that it seems like they're two different parcels. But then he's going to say, well, there's a totally different way to understand parcel. What's prohibited is when it's one expenditure. Or it seems like one expenditure. I went to the market and I bought them at the same time. And then the Gemara says, what, one parcel, does that make a difference? What's the difference between one purchase and two purchases? Like, does that really create a separation? Remember the Gemara said, oh, it's one parcel? No, one parcel? What do you mean by that? It's as if they're one parcel. So he's reading this back in, right? So he's saying a parcel means a purchase. So he's reading that understanding back into the Talmud to say, oh, well, it's prohibited if they're one purchase. What do you mean they're prohibited? What's the difference? One purchase, two purchases. And so he goes on to say, what's the difference between one purchase and two purchases if they know each other? And then they say, correct. It says if it's as if they're one purchase, which is if they know each other. So by this reading, there's no way in which two people who know each other can eat different things on one table. And there's like putting a separation, different mats, different anything, not going to work because of this ke'im tfisa echad, this as if it's one parcel, which comes to mean like if you know each other, it's as if this was all like one purchase, one meal, and you cannot eat different things on the same table. So which one of those two readings seems more true to how you understood the Talmud? Okay, why?
Because it's still talking about whether you know someone or not, like what your relationship is with the people versus just the physical presence of them.
Right. So instead of it being about like the stuff on the table and just, oh, we can resolve it by adding more stuff to the table. It's like, no, this is about people and their relationship. And that makes all the difference in how this halacha is lived out. Anyone want to argue for number one?
The first Mishnah.
The first two, yeah.
Oh yeah, the first two Mishnah.
Can you speak up, please?
Sure.
Yeah, the beginning of the Tosafot actually seems more clear cut to me than
for sure. The reading of the second one.
About
I'm not sure I did
parcels.
justice in explaining.
No. I mean, I sort of understand that it's not exactly about like. It's not about actually purchasing things together, right? It's about like again the relationship of people, who would have something that was purchased together. So they're kind of like going back to like, we bought our lunch together and we know each other. And so it ends up on the table. But the first one seems to be almost enough for me. I don't know.
Just like in your lived experience, it's enough for you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not quite sure like what the purpose is of, like, were they really saying that this is a parcel that's a purchase? Right? Is that really what they're saying? Or that it really was just a matter of like, it looks like you're eating out of the same lunch pail or something. You know what I mean?
Right, and so if it's that it looks like you're eating out of the same lunch pail, so then you can make a separation.
Right.
And that's like a physical separation, and it would work. Yeah. Yeah.
Why does it have to be confined to the table? Like when you put food in your refrigerator,
They didn't really have
what happens if they're eventually touching each other?
Remember that we're like in the year 500 in Persia.
What did you say?
We're in the year 500.
Okay.
So it's a good question, but
In the cellar.
yeah, right. So we saw like if they're on the countertop, you don't have to worry about it. So I mean, that's not like 100% true in Hilchot Kashrut. Like if two things like touch each other for like a really long time, sometimes they like might get absorbed into each other, or at least some people might think they might get absorbed into each other. But like for the most part, it's true. Like if two cold things are next to each other, not so much can go wrong.
Right, so sort of in the end they decide that this is a better idea for friends not to eat milk and dairy together at the same table.
We haven't gotten to the halacha yet. Meaning,
Sure.
And
Well, they're
Tosfot tips their hat, right? So they say, "Lefichach noagim achshav," therefore today, right? In our world, and Tosfot do this a lot, by the way. Like they'll look around at their world, and I mean they're like all over Europe, but let's call them France, and say, say like, here's what we're seeing people do. Let's figure out why it's right. And so, and that's what you see them doing here. Like they're gonna bring this like extensive, complex reading about like probably or potentially at least a tfisa means an expenditure and not a parcel at all. But like, let's explain why the people are doing what they're doing and why we think that's okay.
Right.
Which is like, as I was saying at the beginning, like this is part, like there's a lot of reasons why halacha is beautiful, but one piece of it is that it's reacting to like lived Jews all over the world, and you're seeing that happening here, yeah.
Something that I'm confused about here is in the first one, in the first one it sounds like they're getting rid of the concern of sharing because you're creating some kind of physical barrier, whether it's symbolic or real, of the fact that like we're having two separate meals, we have no intention of sharing food with each other. It doesn't cross my mind that if these people are like, we are intentionally going to be eating these meals together, so we know it's usher for us to mix these foods, and so I'm going to use a different tablecloth. In my mind at that point, there's no fear of any mixing happening, right? Mm-hmm. But then in the second one, where it's talking about like, that none of those things matter, it's just that they know each other. It sounds to me like, is this more of a Mari Ayin case of a fear of like that other people on the outside will look and think that they're going to mix? Because, I mean, it seems like if they went through all the trouble of doing that, right, and it says, you know, that they can't eat it together, even if there is a separation, is how that part of it ends. It sounds like then, is the concern actually about the mixing of foods at that point, or is it about a perception from some other outsider?
Great, or a third option, right? So you said mixing of foods, perception of outsider, and a third option would be that we just don't trust people not to eat off each other's plates.
Yeah.
And like no tablecloth is going to actually get in the way of that.
But there's a lot of things about appears and that it looks as if, right? Mm-hmm. It appears as if it's an expenditure. It looks as if you're eating out of one parcel. So looks are obviously important to these authors here.
Definitely. Yeah, so just to like recap what just happened, which I think is really interesting and good, which is that we started out like, okay, here are some items on various kinds of tables. Then we introduced people and the varieties of relationships between them. And now we're introducing a third set of thing, which is how does it look to an outsider, potentially. I'm walking by and I see, I don't know, whatever, I see the two of you eating at the same table, one meat and one dairy. What assumptions am I going to be making about what's happening at that table? Akiva, yeah, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could introduce looks even earlier, provided we make a distinction, which I think is sort of being gestured at by David, between different kinds of looks, in the sense of there's a concern that it appears like they're doing something. Mm-hmm. That's one kind of look. Right. And then there's a concern that the table looks a certain way, the aesthetics of the table. And that could be tied more to the first two Mishnayot, in the sense that if you have two mapot, that could be a way of creating a sense of two shulchanim, right? Two tables. Rather than it being about the concern of sharing food, it's about the actual aesthetics of the table and this shared space of meat and cheese being located on the same space, in the same space.
Beautiful. So, okay, so we have three potential subjects, and within how do I explain this right? Like we have the stuff, the people, and how it looks to an outsider, and then what is that outsider looking at? That outsider might be looking from, so there's like another chefta gavra, chakira, from the outsider's perspective. Like, is the outsider looking at the table, or is the outsider looking at the people? And if we care about that outsider at all, which is not clear that we do, then we have to ask that question of, well, I care about how this outsider is looking in. What is it that he's looking at, and that will affect him and his judgment.
That's what seems important, though, right? About how this person might act if he thinks, oh, well, they're eating, maybe, or what are they doing? That might be their judgment, but it also might be they might not know as much, and be like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Maybe I can do that.
But just to like bring that home in terms of the like subject matter that I've been driving this whole time, which is, right, the assumptions that outside person might be bringing in about, okay, like why is it that he sees two people eating at the same table and immediately he's like, oh, maybe they're sharing food. Like, why is that an assumption that someone would have? I don't think that in 21st century America, if I saw two people eating together, even at like a restaurant, even on a date, I would not assume they were sharing food. And if in front of me they started sharing food, I would actually like be kind of uncomfortable with that, maybe. And so there's still something, like whichever way, and I think all these texts are potentially, like they don't all have to agree on what perspective matters, whether it's what's on the table, who the people are, what an outsider might see when they're looking at the table, what an outsider might see when they're looking at the people. All these texts might be saying a different one of those variants matters, but anyone looking in on this case, what they're thinking about is these people are going to share food in a way that I think to me feels very foreign. Like that concern feels very foreign, and what I'm seeing are these texts pushing me to think about intimacy in food in a way that's quite different. Yeah, please.
So I just had this epiphany. This is very cultural. That's why it seems so foreign to us.
Mm-hmm.
Because in other cultures, people actually do eat off each other's plates all the time.
Totally.
They definitely do. So
Wait, in where?
In other cultures, people actually eat off each other's plates. In the Middle East, I grew up in Russia, people do it there.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal. Like it's not, there's no barrier of a plate. You can just take off of people's plates.
Sure, and how does that feel when you do that?
Now that I'm Americanized, it feels very odd.
But if you, like when you were growing up in Russia, like how did that feel?
Normal, totally normal.
And were there people whose plates you wouldn't eat off of?
A stranger. So in your family or friends, totally normal.
So like the sphere of food intimacy was just bigger.
Right, definitely.
Cool, that's great. I'm really glad you're here. Yeah, Marilyn.
We used,
And
to
I'll get to you in a
have,
second.
used to have a kosher Chinese restaurant on Javan.
Uh-huh.
And it's customary to share Chinese food, but we wouldn't eat off of each other's plate. What we'd have is a serving plate, then each person would help themselves.
Right, so you share food, but it's still a serving thing that you're. So that you would do the same thing if you were at my house for Shabbos, right? Like I would put a salad on the table, pass it around.
And Ethiopian restaurants, you eat off of a big platter.
And just with your hands.
Indians, you have, you're sharing the same bowls. It's all like
Cultural, totally, yeah.
Just thinking how it gets people get to know each other. For instance, two strangers sit at a table one week, eat one milk, and it's okay. They talk about the meal. The next day, they sit down and eat one milk.
Right, what's the standard of stranger? If I've been sitting at a meal with you for 30 minutes, and then I keep sitting at that meal with you, am I still a stranger, or are we actually like kind of on a date? Right, I think that's a great question. That's a very we're not going to go there, but that's a very germane question. Like what constitutes a stranger? Okay, let's, we saw the Tosfot, and now I think we might do a little bit of skipping. One second. Okay, so basically we're going to see that the Rambam goes with the second opinion of Tosfot. That's source number 5. Source number 6 we're going to see, and that's Sephardic, the Rambam, or Yemenites follow that. Hagot Maimoniot is an Ashkenazi gloss on the Rambam, and he's going to say that if there's something dividing, then it's okay, and he'll bring an interesting proof from Masachet Avodah Zarah that we will not get into. But here, so let's look at the Beit Yosef. The Beit Yosef is Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, but this is kind of his more expansive work that came before. So now we're in number 7. And just as a reminder, if I say any words or refer to any books that you don't know, they're often on the last page. There's a rundown of all the people. Okay, so Beit Yosef. Varif lo iskir had kein tfisa achad. The Rif, okay, sorry. In order to explain this, you have to understand how the Rif works. The Rif is a halacha book where he took the Talmud and crossed out everything that was not practical halacha. So any opinion that he didn't hold by disappears. So in the Rif, it's always an argument from silence, and you have to figure out what he thinks based on what words he left in, which is a really fabulous. Imagine I took Harry Potter, crossed out half the words, and was here's my book. That's what the Rif is, and he's printed in every Talmud under the sun. It's just an amazing kind of thing to do. And he's arrived, and he was very, very influential. Okay, so the Rif doesn't, lo hizkir had the ke'in tfisa achad. The Rif doesn't mention this whole business. V'nir'eh shehu haya mefarish kapirish achron, and it seems like he holds like he explains it like the second explanation of the Tosfot. And that would mean that there's no permissible way for two people who know each other to sit at the table and eat milk and meat, and therefore he just doesn't mention any discussion of a go-around for that. So the Tosfot and the Rosh all bring this up, and the Rambam also holds like that. But the whole world goes according to the first opinion to eat this one is meat and this one is meat. His dairy al yedei hefsik shebenehem, through by having a separator or like some sort of strange thing on the table that'll help them to remember that they shouldn't be eating out of each other's plates. Or each one's on their own tablecloth. And Rabbeinu Yerucham also says that the first one seems like that's the main interpretation of the Talmud. And this is how the nation has conducted itself, and that's how we're gonna go by in the halacha, which is again an amazing thing where you see a lot of important halachic decisors saying, well, this seems like the right interpretation. You have the Rif and the Tosfot and the Rush and the Rambam, who are all really big, important people lining up on one side, but the whole world is doing this thing that we also do, where you'll just put a different tablecloth or a different placemat or whatever, and then it's fine, and you'll eat at the same table, and that seems to make all the difference. So what we're seeing that's interesting is that these cultural understandings of intimacy in food already had shifted from the times in the Talmud, where it's like, if you know each other, like you're for sure gonna eat off each other's plates, there's no saving you, like you can't like put up some barrier in between or like put a jug on the table that's not normally there, like no, that's not gonna work. Everyone was doing it, and that was how Kashrut was observed, and so that won out at the end of the day, and we've now, and Tosfot, starting with Tosfot, but then getting carried forward, now we're seeing it again, the Beit Yosef. Okay, this is what the people are doing, and that carries with it a wisdom about whether we're likely to share food or not, and that wisdom carries halachic weight, and that is what ends up being the halacha. And that you can see that here in the Shulchan Aruch. So that's number 8. Time check. Okay. You're just going to trust me that that's number 8. And we're going to look at, just quickly, so there's a gloss of the Ramah in the Hebrew, that's Haggah here, that's like the 3rd paragraph down. And he's just going to explain what constitutes, so the language that becomes for this like divider thing is called a heker, like a thing that you'll recognize, or like it'll help you, it'll be like a memory device. So he says, so if you use bread as your like memory device thing, you can't eat from it. But if you're eating from it, then that doesn't work. That seems very reasonable. But if you'll put between you a thing that you're drinking out of, but normally you would never have your water jug on the table, then it does work. That works as a memory device, even though you're drinking from the kli, from the jug. And if you put a lamp there, or anything else that's on the table, it all works as a heker. But if you don't drink, like if you have a jug that you're like pouring into cups, that's great, but don't drink out of the same thing because your food will get stuck on it. And don't eat from the same bread. And you should each have your own salt thing, and because like if you dip into salt, sometimes stuff will stay. So now we've moved from, okay, does a heker even work, to like what is its purpose? Like what constitutes a heker? What's going to actually remind you not to eat off each other's plates? And you still need it, and we're still worried about it. We're still worried that this thing won't actually be effective enough, and you'll actually like come to reach across the table and eat off the other person's plate as long as you know them, and maybe this thing won't work, right? So like, yes, we say we're gonna go with the heker option, we're gonna go with the option of putting something as a reminder, but we're still like anxious about it. Yeah.
So
interesting that we now maybe can eliminate that as bad as people's perceptions, because they're not going to recognize whether that's a familiar jug or unfamiliar jug on the table. One of the people sitting at the table are going to know. So.
Great, right. The minute you have, that's a wonderful point. The minute you have, like, oh, is it normally there or not? Meaning, unless the halacha was, like, put a flamingo on your table, that eliminates the outsider's perspective, because that's much more subjective, and you're the only people who are going to know. Okay. Oh, and then the Bach here says that, quoting the Maharshal, he says, well, what if you're like at the same table but just sitting so far away from each other that you can't possibly reach onto someone else's plate? Like, does that work? And he says, yeah, that works. And even the people who think that some sort of memory device doesn't work, they'll say that sitting far enough apart from each other does work. So that's just kind of like an interesting thing. Okay, I think we're going to skip the shach and just get to this next point, because this Gemara here is like really intense. We have to see it. Okay, source number 11. A woman who is menstruating, can she and her husband sleep in one bed if they're wearing separate clothes? Amar Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef says, Tashma, and where's his proof about to come from? Ha'of ola im hagvina al hashulchan ve'eno ne'echal. Fowl is permitted to be placed together with cheese on the table, but it cannot be eaten together. Divrei Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel omrim lo ola v'lo ne'echal. That was the opinion of Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say cannot go up and cannot be eaten. How did we get here?
It is that connection to relationships, right? Like closeness, and that there's like two examples of things that need to be separated, right? Both in Nida and Kashrut. Similarly, if you want to go really Kabbalistic, it's like you have like blood things and not blood things. I don't know, just throwing that out there. Like, I don't know what that represents.
All right, anyone else? How did we get here? The Gemara just made like this intense leap. Why? How? Yeah, okay, good. Intense leaps in the Gemara. But usually there's some...
Women often bring in food.
Right, women and food just to go together, yes. Definitely. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. Shani hatam delikadeo. No, because the chicken and the cheese, they don't have two separate consciousnesses, but people do. Cool. So you might say, oh, well, there's two or more consciousnesses different, and you would bring as proof for that the second half of the Mishnah, where Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, the minute you have people, right, two people at an inn who are eating at one table, but one's eating meat and one's eating cheese, you don't have to worry about it, because now you have two people. This is their read. We know this is not the correct read of this Mishnah, but the read right now is you have two people, two consciousnesses. Great, you don't have to worry about it. They know the rules. They're going to keep themselves away from each other. But now the Gemara is going to say, no, that's not how that ends. The Gemara rejects this. That's not a proof. Wasn't it said with regards to this halacha, according to Rav Chanina bar Ami, said, in the name of Shmuel, they only taught the two of them may eat on one table when they're not familiar with each other. But if they know each other, it's prohibited. This husband and wife who they know each other. Ideally. Okay, and so then the Gemara rejects the whole thing. How can you compare these cases? The case of meat and milk, there's two consciousnesses, but there's no normal change from the, there's no normal, deo ika shinui leka, but there's no heker, there's no like weird thing happening. But hacha, ika deo ika shinui, but here there's a weird thing happening, and there's two consciousnesses. There's people because the husband and wife don't normally sleep in separate clothes, and now they are, and there's two consciousnesses. So maybe you can't learn from there to the Nida case. Eventually, I just brought in the end of the Talmud here, so no one walks away with the wrong opinion, which is Ichdoni da hu vigdo v'hi vigda asur shmamina. So the eventual conclusion of the Gemara is that a husband and menstruating wife cannot sleep in the same bed even when they're wearing different clothes. But this is kind of an incredible moment, right, where we go from kashrut to intimacy and back, like very seamlessly. And that's kind of what I'm driving at, which is that food and intimacy are like really go hand in hand in a way that like we know where we think about in kind of like weird ways. Like let's go out to like a fancy dinner. That's like a classic date that like food and intimacy go together there. And certainly like in this Gemara, it's very much like sex, food, great. Like those are like very fluid in this Gemara right here, those two concepts. But I wonder whether, like, given what we've been talking about this whole night and what we've been looking at so far, it's not just like sex. It's that food involves a certain intimacy with the people you share it with. And who are you sharing food with? Well, maybe a lot of people, maybe anyone you know, and maybe that sharing is like this very intimate thing that you're supposed to have with people. You're supposed to naturally have it with people, so much so that when you're not allowed to share food, like you're eating meat and you're eating dairy, you have to kind of work hard to undo that intimacy. Like the assumption of these halachic texts, even as we get pretty late, even as we get to the Ramah, is still, oh, is this heker good enough? Is this distinguishing thing or this memory device, like is it actually going to work? Because like there's this assumption of this natural draw to share food, and that in sharing food we have this like intimacy that's shared with other people that we should naturally want, and that they're imagining is like just a very sort of human thing. As Florina was pointing out before, like it's very cultural what that intimacy feels like, but in many cultures that are not the United States, that sphere of people who we share food and through food intimacy with, where like the distinction between like my food and food for sharing is a lot more blurry, and there's something that's like very like warm and loving about that I think these texts are sort of pushing. And so I'll say one last like halachic bit at the end, because it just this Gemara, like what the outcome of this Gemara is very interesting. But what I want to say is that I think where this can take us in life is that in our shul and in the world, we have the opportunity to like share food with people a lot. Like every Shabbos after services, we have Kiddush, and Kiddush feels like kind of this weird thing, like why do we have so much food, and like why are we all here talking to people, and I'm gonna go into the corner and like only talk to the people I know because they're the people I know, and that's like very, I think something that I've observed in every shul under the sun is like that's very normal. But I think part of the idea is that food opens a door to intimacy. When you're saying like, hey, pass the kugel, that's an opening to conversation, that's an opening to shared bonding over like, wow, this kugel is really delicious. And like deepened community through the like inherent intimacy of food sharing. And I think that's what we do, and I think the halachot of Kashrut really like push that and assume that, and then try and like, they're not trying to say don't feel like food is intimate. They're trying to say food is so intimate and you want to share it with so many people that just make sure like you keep milk and meat separate, because you'll be drawn to not otherwise because of this like overwhelming drive towards food sharing, which I think is like really beautiful. And just the one last point I'll just put in about the connection between food and intimacy is that this does get brought down into Hilchot Nida. So the Shulchan Aruch says, and now we're in Hilchot Nida, this is source number 13, Lo yochal ima al hashulchan elim ken yeshum shinui sheyesh shum davar mafsik bein kara shelo lekara shela. So if a woman is Nida, one of the separations that a couple should observe is that if the two of them are eating at a table, they should like put something different on the table so that they'll remember not to eat off each other's plates. And what's fascinating about that is then what's happening is that the relationship between a husband and wife, like there's actually not so much difference between that relationship and the relationship between any two people who know each other. Like they need a heker, they need a thing that's gonna help them remember, oh, you can't share food right now. And when someone's eating milchigs and someone's eating fleishigs, like they need the same thing. As if like you have the same level of food intimacy with that person as you do with your spouse. Which is like really, I think, intense, and for us like pretty, and for Americans like countercultural. But I really like it. Okay, thanks. So we've gone 5 minutes over, but I'm happy to like take any questions, or if people have thoughts or feelings, or you love eating off other people's plates at Kiddush, like I'd love to hear about it. So yes, but thank you all so much for coming, and next week we'll be at 7:30 again, and I changed all the Facebook events, and next week is I think we called it forgetfulness, and it'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the class I had on laws of mikvah, saying that during nida, you have to do something that doesn't belong on the table to separate, or one has a placemat, but it doesn't, or separate placemats. But what if there's other people at the table?
Good. So if there's other people at the table, this is not observed. The assumption is like other people, like either like it's embarrassing for you to have it there,
Right.
or that other people are enough of like a reminder that you won't behave like intimately.
Would you avoid sitting next to each other?
People don't. No, you don't need to.
When I was on a cruise with Kabbalah,
Yeah.
the husbands and wives
How are you?
at different tables.
Uh-huh. Wow. Yeah, but I don't like that. Could be about something else, you know. Like I don't know what could. I can't speak to that.
Dang. Dang.